Hey, paisanos, it's the Super Mario Brothers Super Show!
With the Mario Brothers and plumbing's our game. We're not like the others who get all the fame. If your sink is in trouble, you can call us on the double. We're faster than the others, you'll be hooked on the brothers. Hooked on the brothers.
Hey everybody, Brian the Brain here, and this is the second week in Mario March Madness. And this week we're reviewing some episodes of the previous Mario shows that were on TV from about 1989 to about 1991. And this week, my co-host is Jerome Hewson. He can be found on Twitter at JeromeC1985. And we ask you that you leave a 4 or 5 star review on any of your podcasting apps, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever, so more people can find what we're doing here at the Real World, so we can have more viewers and whatnot. So that helps us out. This week's episode is really interesting because we're looking at like 4 different animated shows from an era where, I don't know, Nintendo's not doing it now where they're having like animated shows promoting their games or whatever, but this was that era from like 1989 to 93. But yeah, because a lot of people that know the wrestler Captain Lou Albano, they're going to recognize him not just as Captain Lou Albano, but as the live action Mario from the Mario show. So that's kind of where we're going to start at. But Jerome, like, did you watch any of these shows? I know you watched Captain N, which is the bonus episode we're going to talk about, but how familiar are you with these Mario shows? Because I never watched these until I worked at Blockbuster.
I definitely remember the Super Mario Super Show. I think that aired on the Fox affiliate here. I vaguely remember watching this one. I also remember watching Super Mario 3. And my guess is that I ended up watching Super Mario World just because that one seemed to have some attachment to Captain N the Game Master. So my guess is that they all kind of ran together. But there is one of the 3 animated shows that is so much better than the other 2. And we're going to get into that in just a second. But I definitely remember watching these as a kid. And that's why I specifically requested watching an episode of Captain N the Game Master. Because in multiple ways, it in fact connects with our discussion of Mario.
For sure. So the first show that premiered was the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Debuted September 4th of 89 and only lasted until December 1st of 89, short run. So it's kind of loosely based on Mario 1 and 2. And it's got like live action segments at the beginning and the end of the show. So that kind of cuts down the animation time for the animators so they can make like, I don't know, like 15 minutes of animation, and then you got like 5 minutes of filler of live action stuff, which kind of works, but then doesn't kind of work. But it does lead to awesome guest stars. Like this episode that we're going to talk about has Vanna White. There was other episodes with Roddy Piper, Sergeant Slaughter, other countless celebrities that probably were friends with Lou Albano and just asked them to be on the show really quick. So I think Cyndi Lauper appeared as well. So interesting selection of celebrities to kind of come in and kind of promote their stuff or whatever, plus being on the Mario show. Very interesting stuff. And then they would kind of cut into the animated part. But I don't know, the voice, because they carried over with the voices too. So Captain Lou Albano is the voice of Mario, Danny Wells is the voice of Luigi. But I talked about this last week. I think Captain Lou's voice is too low to be Mario. Like, I think Mario has to be a certain high pitch, but not too high pitch. And it just doesn't work for me when he's doing the Mario voice because it just doesn't sound like a Mario. It sounds like just a regular dude. And Mario shouldn't sound like a regular dude. He should sound like an animated video game character. So that's kind of where I'm at with this show. Like, a lot of the show's concepts or a lot of the show's episodes are just based on like movie parodies, which is fine because like that's the kind of shit that we ended up watching on Muppet Babies anyway, and it works. So the episode that I chose is Raiders of the Lost Mushroom because we know Jerome loves Raiders of the Lost Ark so fucking much. And in fact, I told him to pick a random movie before 1990 because the odds are that the show probably parodied it. And the first movie he chose before 1990 was Raiders of the Lost Ark. And immediately I find the episode and it was just as if it was meant to be. So it's Raiders of the Lost Mushroom. And just basically Mario is teaming up with like an Indiana Jones type. His name is Indiana Joe, who doesn't have a face for some reason and he's like overweight. But they're looking for like a statue and it's called the Lost Mushroom, and you can just have any wish you want, and the statue will grant it or whatever. So there's, wish shenanigans and hijinks and like wishing for things that you probably shouldn't wish for. Like I wish for a whole building full of pasta, and then Mario gets a whole building full of pasta, just shit like that. So it's kind of hit or miss. The animation, I don't know, it's like a B level. It's I would say the animation in the anime from last week is much better, but I don't know if it's because of the quality or whatever. Because these episodes are actually on Tubi, but the problem is they're not HD remasters, and they're kind of just like thrown in as like a DVD transfer, which sucks because there's a lot of grain. So it's almost as if you can watch the YouTube uploads and still get the same visual quality, which I don't know. That kind of rubs me the wrong way, but it's like, why would you spend the money to HD remaster these episodes anyway? So it's kind of like the money's not there, so you're kind of stuck with these DVD quality transfers. But that's just a whole nother thing. So I would say this episode is decent, but I did pop for Vanna White coming out at the end. So I think what I like more about this show is the live action than the cartoon.
What was going on with that? It was so weird having Vanna White just appear out of nowhere, because it's like she had been on Wheel of Fortune, I think, for 8 years at this point, and based on her performance in these few minutes that she was on Mario, I could see why she was never an actor.
Yeah, you ever see the Married with Children episode where she tries to buy Al?
I can't even imagine. It's got to be just as stiff.
Oh, it was stiff, but like I can't help but be nostalgic because she was one of the guest celebrity hosts of WrestleMania 4, and WrestleMania 4 was like a 4-hour show, and when you're watching that as a kid, you have these memories, and Vanna White just sticks out because she's just smiling and looking gorgeous, and yeah, she's awesome. But she comes onto this show and just kind of like, eh. But I get it. She's not supposed to be a regular actress. She's just like, a game show host or whatever. So I get why she doesn't get the roles that she,
Right.
not necessarily deserves.
All she does is turn letters. Underrated highlight of WrestleMania 4 is Jesse Ventura toward the end of the night being like, "It's been too long of a night. I'm tired of arguing with you." That is just tremendous stuff that you don't get from commentary anymore. And in keeping with the wrestling connection, I would say the fundamental problem is they're too old. Like, that's the thing, is that Mario and Luigi, like, I'm picturing them like in their 20s or their 30s. Like, that's kind of the vibe I'm going for. And Lou Albano's like in his 50s at this point, and it's just inappropriate. And I get why they cast Lou Albano, because Lou Albano is kind of a cartoon character, but just because he's Lou Albano and has facial hair doesn't mean that it's appropriate for Mario. And I love the idea that this is like supposed to be a satire of sitcoms. The only way that it is a satire is in the fact that it is incredibly unfunny. And this was an excruciating 22 minutes because the animation wasn't very good. The live action plot line wasn't very good. This was easily the worst of the 4 episodes we watched today. This was easily the worst one. I barely remember anything from the Raiders of the Lost Mushroom. It was like a parody it was like an homage with no teeth, no adding to the lore or doing anything interesting or funny. This was just bad TV. It was bad animation, and it's the very purpose of which is to sell Nintendo and possibly sell professional wrestling, given the amount of wrestling connections. But otherwise, this was very bad.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to point out in the live action segments is somehow they're able to make these amazing looking pizzas while at the same time being in like a construction area. So yeah, that's just weird stuff going on in the background. There are always these weird things going on with like the set. So like I watched another episode where Sergeant Slaughter came on, and there was like this machine washing thing, and Albano goes into the thing and he's inside of it, and he comes out as like a midget or a short person, excuse me. And I'm just like, what the hell? How do they? What? Just weird things like that happen on this show. So it's not necessarily for me, but I do appreciate the cameos and stuff, so I'm kind of on the same boat as Jerome on this one. But it does have a lot of parodies, but I think Muppet Babies did the movie parody thing better. So that's just me. On to the next show, The Adventures of Super Mario Bros. 3. Now, this gets a lot better. So it's based on Mario 3, the design, the look, the characters. This was released on September 8th, 1990. Had like a short run to December 1st, 1990. But, this is kind of has more like King Koopa and, his henchmen And like I love the visual look of the thing because it does look like Mario 3, like distinctly. Like if you compare the animation from the Mario Bros. Super Show and this one, they clearly took like not sprites but like a lot of the design templates and kind of just brought it to the show. And I think it works out a lot better. And these two episodes that played together as a single episode were actually well written. So it's one of those things where it's like Rugrats, where it splits off into two 10-minute episodes within the 30-minute episode. And the first episode is called True Colors, and Kooky and Cheatsy, who are working for Koopa, use a special paint that turns the mushroom people into either red or blue, and they keep disguising themselves as red people and blue people to kind of plant seeds of hatred against one another, and it works. And I'm just like, holy shit, this is like one of the best displays of like psychology I've ever seen in a children's show. And not only that, you could probably show this episode, just this 10-minute episode in college psychology classes, and just get the message across so much easier than what they try to teach you from the books, because this is psychology 101. Like, you see people turning on each other just because they say shit or they hear things, and it's like, oh, he hit me. Those blue guys are so mean. He hit me. Oh, that red guy beat me up. So I was just like, oh, this is great. This is great. And they're turning against each other. And we just talked about the Matrix 4 red pill, blue pill. So this red blue thing going on, primary colors.
It's also Raw and SmackDown. I couldn't help but think of Raw.
Raw and SmackDown.
SmackDown.
So there you go.
When they would have them goofily wearing red or blue shirts, depending on which brand they were on. This was definitely much better, though. I think just in terms of the quality of the writing, it was just exponentially better. The animation was a little bit better. I'm not as much into Koopa's kids, but I think they served a pretty good purpose here as far as antagonizing a near race war. But the best moment, Brian, is now the time to talk about the best moment, the ending.
So what? That they discover that they're just the same or whatever, and they have this nice speech.
So Mario looks into the camera and says that basically says that racism will not end, and they will never be as smart as mushrooms. That's basically what he says.
He's kind of right. He's kind of right.
Wow, he is absolutely right. But to have a children's animation show, and again, Mario is looking right into the camera when he's saying it, and I was like, that is cold. That is stone cold right there. And I liked it. This is great. This is definitely my favorite. The next episode was okay, but this one, I feel it really did some great stuff in just 11 minutes. And I almost if this was what all of them were like, I probably would have considered doing like a full run, but unfortunately they're not all as good as this one.
So the second half of this episode is called Recycled Koopa, and it's basically the Koopalings are trying to clean up the Koopa Kingdom, and they're trying to figure out...
This is like Captain Planet in Mario.
Exactly. So they're trying to find the fastest way to do it. So I guess they're playing on this idea that when kids are told to clean their room, they just shove everything in their closet, which I've not exactly done. I've done something similar to that when I was a kid and put the other half under my bed or whatever. But yeah, so basically they find one of the pipes that goes directly into Earth, our Earth. Because, again, the idea of Super Mario 3 is that Mario and Luigi are from Earth and they go into the video game world, right? So they start dumping all this Koopa trash on Earth around Brooklyn, and because of like, I don't know, radiation or the dynamics of cross-dimensional transfer, the trash is making the humans turn into Koopa people. So I was like, okay, we're doing zombie, we're doing recycling, we're doing Earth, green Earth message here. So there's a lot going on. And eventually they're like, oh my God, Luigi and Mario are just like, what do we do? What do we do? Because every time they start cleaning, they keep dumping more trash. So it just seems like it's never going to stop. So in terms of like the sense of drama where it feels like it's almost impossible to win, they got that down, because a lot of these episodes don't nail that, like that sense of drama where it's like, oh my God, there's no turning back. We can't save the world. But eventually Luigi figures out like, hey, I can build like, because, they're carpenters or whatever they want to be. They can just kind of figure out how to build things. They build this like giant car that kind of looks like the turtle car, but it's cleaning everything. But the problem is Mario, unfortunately, turned into a Koopa. So Yeah, so once they cleaned up the area that Mario was in or whatever, he turns back to human, and then eventually they start cleaning the city, and they all turn back to humans. And Mario and Luigi save the day, and they throw the trash back at Koopa into his world. So I get it, and I recycle, and I try to recycle at work and whatnot. So I get the whole environmental message. And you mentioned Captain Planet. That's exactly what I thought of. But I thought it was very creative that they did like the zombie angle to it, which I did not expect. I thought it was just going to be trash being thrown and humans are going to be complaining. But in this case, no, they're turning into Koopas and they're kind of acting like zombies.
Yeah, I think this was a step down from the previous one. I don't think the message quite got there, but I definitely think it was amusing. Just the visuals of everybody turning into Koopas. I think that's kind of what made it work. And Mario Koopa was pretty entertaining as well. And the Koopalings are they're little bastards. Like that's what it comes down to is that, they don't want to clean up their trash. You want to stick it down all these warps. I almost think if this was like a full 22 minutes, like they could have gone even farther with it. But I was pretty amused by this episode at the very least. And yeah, I at least can remember like moments and elements in certain parts to this, whereas with a lot of the other episodes that we're going to discuss, the two other ones, yeah, I don't necessarily remember it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this particular episode, both episodes combined, and you could tell like this is what I call smart ass writing. You know what I mean? Where it's like the writing seems so good that it shouldn't be on this TV show; it should be somewhere else. Like it's too good for the show. And in this case, this is kind of what it is: like smart ass writers going above and beyond, making the show something more than it is, to the point where you could show that 10-minute clip into a psychology class and have it work. So there you go on that one. The next show is Super Mario World, and that's based on the Super Nintendo Mario game, and that's the one I played the most. And that's the one I saw more people playing at the after-school programs and stuff. And I would play a little bit of it. I can get further into that one than I did the previous game, but again, I didn't know how to run. I didn't know you could run until I was in college, so that kind of hindered me. But again, this was the era that introduced Mario Kart on Super Nintendo, and that's my Mario game go to. Probably that Mario Party and like I don't know, maybe Luigi's Mansion I'll throw in there too. But so this was debuted on September 14th, 1991, all the way to December 7th, 1991, and that kind of fits the time frame of when the Super Nintendo came out, so that's perfect. And this was actually paired up with the show that we're going to talk about next that you love, Captain N, the Game Master, and I guess they kind of paired it together as like a block. Which is why these episodes are kind of shorter. So this is another 10-minute episode, but again, it was paired off with another show. So I think it was like this and Captain N together. But in this episode of Super Mario World, Mario invents the wheel. And I don't know. I've never seen these cave people before. Were they in the video game?
I don't remember. If they were, please let us know. But I don't remember them. This was just a weird episode. Like it was just kind of boring. Like that's the thing, is just like it felt like I watched this one after the Super Mario Super Show, and I was just like, okay, this is just kind of a continuation of that in a lot of ways, because it just felt like Super Mario 3, the writing was just a little bit sharper, and this one I think it just feels like, okay, we're kind of back to just kind of doing these random things that aren't very funny and aren't very amusing, and we're just kind of selling video games. Like that's kind of what the vibe I was getting from this.
Yeah, because I have never heard of these cave people before. They look like Super Nintendo characters from like a different video game, but I couldn't recognize them at all. And apparently they're kind of just there, and like Mario and Luigi are kind of like on their turf, I guess, and they're kind of living with them. And I guess they don't have wheels, so they're just working hard all the time. So Mario creates the wheel for them, and of course, with the wheel comes cars, and what comes with cars? Traffic. So within a minute, like already, like there's traffic jams within the creation of the wheel. So I laughed at that because I get what they were doing, because I live in Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley. Traffic is terrible. That's been the joke since 1955 or whatever, but. I was just laughing my ass off because I was like, oh, they're doing the traffic gimmick, and because the show was probably written somewhere in L.A. or something, and they were just complaining about the traffic one day and decided to make a Mario episode about traffic and decided to have Mario create the wheel in order to have traffic. So that was kind of the thing, and I was like, man, there's a lot of horns right now. And the funny thing was like there's no horns visually anywhere you see, but you hear these horns honking all the time. So it's just like, what the fuck is going on here? And then Koopa finds out and he tries to like, I don't know, terrorize the people while they're in gridlock. And Mario and Luigi save the day, but they end up taking the wheel away from their culture. And like, let's not bring in a wheel in for like another 100 years or whatever. So that was kind of weird that they were just like doing this thing where it's kind of like Cortez and the Aztecs, and it's like they're treating them like gods, maybe. And they're supposed to be like the Eternals, where they're kind of guiding their culture into like the future, but then they regret giving them the wheel because it just caused gridlock traffic.
Yeah, just a really strange episode. I'm not quite sure what the message was that they were going for here. And I would have liked to have seen some sort of a point.
I know. I
That's
thought
what
they
I
were
was-
going for like, hey, we're gonna invent stop signs or something, or we're gonna invent traffic lights or something like that, where then becomes like a traffic message for kids or something to follow the signs or whatever. And they didn't even do that. They just got rid of the wheel. And then the more they're just joking, like, hey, let's just not give them the wheel for a long time and not deal with this shit. So that was weird, but again, the visually was cool because I think it is a step up slightly from the animation, as you can tell, because like it's from the first show was in '89, we're in '91 now, and of course the animation is going to get better. So that was the only plus, and it does have the visuals of Super Mario World from Super Nintendo. So that's as much credit as I can give it. Otherwise, it's kind of whatever. Um, let's move on to Captain and the Game Master. Now, this was a request from Jerome, and this kind of came up in pair with the blocks anyway. So this was on September 9th, 1989, all the way to October 26th, 1991. And I was shocked because this kind of lasts the length of the three Mario shows, and this show got like 3 seasons of its own. But it was tying in all the other games, right? So that's what kind of made it, or gave it its longevity, because it can always constantly tie in the other Nintendo games. But the funny thing is that the character is from Northridge, California. Northridge, Los Angeles, California. And I was 6 years old, or 5 years old, when the 1994 Northridge earthquake hit in January of 94. And I survived it. And a lot of people I knew survived it, but some of the people I know nowadays were not even around Northridge at the time. And they're just kind of like, what? I didn't experience that. So this brought me back when I read Northridge, California. And the fact that this was 3 years before the earthquake, just kind of like, oh, that got me some chills, because I lived that. And for like, I don't know, the next couple of days after the big earthquake, we were just kind of like sleeping in the car, trying to avoid buildings, because the buildings were collapsing all around us because of the structure. And that kind of changed things in LA. The way structured buildings became, like, they had become earthquake proof. Earthquake proof buildings were not even a thing until like after the Northridge earthquake in LA, which goes to show you, that's just LA. But yeah, it reminded me of that, because Northridge, California, man, that's a big deal, and that's where they film. I would say 30% of the mall, or maybe even 40% of the mall scenes from Terminator 2.
Yeah, so clearly a lot of connections to California. I remember this was like before I went to school in the morning. I used to watch this and Mario. And I think that the Zelda show as well was a part of this block. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to review this specific episode, Quest for the Potion of Power, because it did combine like 2 shows together, and you get a little bit of Mega Man, a little bit of Icarus, a little bit of Simon Belmont from their various games, Castlevania, Mega Man, and yeah. So that's why I wanted to look at this episode. So I'm very surprised that you had never seen this before.
Yeah, I mean, like, when I mentioned that I was at Blockbuster at the time working there in like 2009, and I found the kids section and found all the Mario stuff, there was no Captain N stuff. There was no Legend of Zelda stuff. It was just Mario, so I didn't even think that these shows would exist. But then later on, I found that Legend of Zelda existed as a show, and then Captain N as like a tie into all the other games. So for me, I was like, whoa, there's this other history. And then a couple months ago, I tried to binge watch the Legend of Zelda show. But after 2 episodes, I was kind of like, okay, I'm kind of done with this already. But when I watched this episode, I was like, oh, they got the same cast back because it's the same guy as the bad guy. I forget his name, but it's the same Link. It's the same Zelda voices. And they're just kind of doing this crossover with Captain N. And it kind of like has this good dynamic to it, to the point where I thought Link was not Link. Because I thought, man, Link is not acting like himself, but I guess he's just threatened by the presence of Captain N, which is a very alpha male thing to do, which makes sense.
He doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to be. To use your words that you used last week, he doesn't want to be a cuck in this situation because Princess Zelda is the one that asked for Captain N's help, and clearly Link is being very jealous. We don't see very much of Princess Lana in this episode, but you can imagine her being pretty jealous as well. So yeah, Captain Ed is just here to help, and like this is taking place after presumably the Zelda show has taken place and they destroyed Ganon or killed Ganon. And I have to say that the way they visualize Ganon in the show, both like the pig version before he becomes Ganon and then the Ganon itself, is pretty terrifying.
Yeah, so the version of Ganon that I know is kind of like the skull-looking thing, right? But that's after the first couple episodes, and I guess he transforms again? Is that what happens?
Yeah, I think that's...
Okay, because he did not look like the one... I was like, he looks like he's gained some weight, and he's gained some, like skin. But, because in the beginning of the Legend of Zelda show, you see Ganon as, like, this skeleton-like figure that doesn't have, like, full power yet. And that's kind of what they're building to in the show. But in this case, it just, when I watched this episode, it just made me think of the funny thing with Link's sword that has always just not bothered me, but just made me laugh, where it's like, we can't have Link use the sword as like a sword. He can use it as a sword sometimes, but instead we're just going to have him use the sword as a laser gun, which is from the original game anyway. So I always thought that was funny, because I guess I'll see YouTubers, especially now, because there's this... like a VR upgrade that people made of the original Zelda game, right? And you can do a VR of the original Zelda game, and you're shooting like the lasers coming out of the sword. And I keep watching that visually, even in 2023. I'm like, God damn! Like, we're using swords as like a laser gun. Yeah. So it's just so weird that they always did that in the Zelda games for me. And when they do it in the show, I'm just laughing because it's like, oh, we're doing the thing where we're taking a sword and using it as a gun again, but. It was fine for what it was, and I did like the dynamic between Captain N and Link, because they were doing that alpha male gimmick. But in the end, they had to come together and save the day. But visually, I think there's some really creative stuff in this that I liked also about The Legend of Zelda, where they had that fantasy element to it, where they threw in some of the fantasy visuals with, like, wizards and potions and that kind of thing. So I was digging that part. But one thing that really threw me off, and you didn't give me an answer to this, but is the Captain N planet that he goes to, that not virtual, but like that video game world that he goes to, half the planet, the bottom half, is a stone structure.
Yes, I guess so. They don't really get into that, but I wanted to ask if Mother Brain's voice sounded familiar to you.
No.
So the voice of Mother Brain is also the voice of Audrey II in the 1986 version of Little Shop of Horrors. The voice is Levi Stubbs, who is also the lead vocalist for the Four Tops. So I know you've heard like Bernadette before. That is the
I
same
love
voice
the
as
Four
Mother
Tops.
Brain.
Love the Four Tops, and Bernadette is a classic banger. Wow, that explains a lot, because in Little Shop of Horrors, wasn't the plant singing too? Or no? Did I just
Absolutely?
Yeah. So there you go. It's all connected.
Very much so.
But you love this Captain N show so much. Is this your favorite episode of the show?
This is definitely up there, just because of the connections. I'm a fan of the crossovers. There are definitely some other ones that we could have done, but the reason that I chose this one specifically is because I remember enjoying. Like, obviously, I don't love the show as much as I did when I was 6 years old and watching it in syndication, but this is definitely, this almost doesn't represent what the show is actually about, because we don't get a lot of the usual characters. It is so heavily Link based, so this one is maybe not as representative of some of the other ones, because they go into some pretty weird directions. But how do you feel about the idea of Game Boy being an actual thing and turning into a baseball bat and hitting people as a baseball bat?
Okay, so it made me think of Adventure Time, the show that started years ago, and I think it wrapped up a couple years ago on Cartoon Network. But in Adventure Time, there is a character called BMO, right? And BMO is this talking Game Boy looking thing that's like the actual size of a Game Boy, and it just talks and does things, and it's like bluish green, and I can't help but think like, oh my god, they really got this from like a talking Game Boy that was a talking Game Boy in Captain N, because I was like, dude, is that BMO? And then it's just a talking Game Boy, which okay, here's the thing though, look, the animation's great and all, but a Game Boy, God, it's not thin. A Game Boy, an original Game Boy, is not thin. It has a fat ass. OG Game Boys always have had the fat ass, and they didn't give this Game Boy a fat ass, so I was kind of disappointed with that. They made him thin. I don't know if it's like fat shaming thing, but
Of all the things that you could pick apart and critique, I love that this is the direction we're going in.
dude, I look. You know it's true. An OG Game Boy is fat in the ass, right? I'm not making that up.
No, you're absolutely right, but I think from a visual animation standpoint, I think you have to make it more sleek. Otherwise, it's not gonna function well.
Yeah, so that was my one critique because I look, I love Game Boys. I still get DS games. Like I'm building a small DS collection of like Pokemon stuff, and I love Pokemon games and the original cartridges and stuff. So I know my Game Boys, man. So yeah, that was the one thing, and I was like, are they gonna have to change his batteries soon or something like that? And of course, they didn't acknowledge that. If they had to change his batteries in one episode, I would have laughed my ass off. But luckily, they didn't even think of that because I think that would have been too meta, maybe. I don't know, but that would have been hilarious.
Well,
if they changed
there
batteries.
are episodes when Captain N has to charge his belt. I know that has been a plot point.
That's hilarious. Oh, and then Captain Ed is also using the Nintendo gun, which is awesome. Because, God, that gun is so iconic, even though it's not a real gun. But I think every person around our age sees that and just kind of marks out for Duck Hunt. And Duck Hunt was a legit good game. I don't care what people say. I know it was stupid and simple, but Duck Hunt fucking rocked for the time it was in 1991 or whatever. So.
I mean, it got a lot of people into video games, undoubtedly. So, yeah, I think this is just an excuse to talk about Nintendo and kind of our relationship with it. Again, you don't get to see a lot of the other characters like you would have. You almost would have been better off like watching the pilot and then watching this episode just to kind of get an idea. But yeah, this was my childhood in so many ways. This and like DuckTales and Darkwing Duck. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So now we're going to be talking about movies for the next 2 weeks. One of which I can already tell you I despise.
Well, before that, we got to make the official vote. I think we both agree the best show was The Adventures of Super Mario 3 just because of the smart-ass writing.
It is not even close.
Not even close. So that kind of wraps up this week. But next week, we're going to go to the movie section of this exploration. And next week, we're going to watch The Wizard. Now, if you've never heard of The Wizard, I would highly recommend checking it out. Fred Savage is in it, Beau Bridges, Christian Slater. Surprising cast, but it works as a road movie because it is a road movie. It's about these kids that are trying to enter their little brother into this video game tournament so they can win this money. And I think I haven't seen this in forever, but I think also the subplot is they want their parents to get back together. That's the whole trope in a lot of '90s kids movies that use that trope. So it goes into that, and it goes into the love of video games and why this kid loves video games and Nintendo so much. And then, spoiler alert, the finale in the movie is the debut of Mario 3, where basically it's like the final, the kid makes the final, and it's like, what video game are they going to have to play? And it's Mario 3, and it kind of creates an even playing field because no one at that time, except the developers, had played Mario 3. And Mario 3 was just kind of being built up in Nintendo magazines or whatever, and not even been released yet. So this was kind of a surprise for the fans and people that were like video game fans wanting to watch the movie because they're Nintendo fans. So that was kind of a nice gift for the fans, and we're going to watch that next week. But also, it works well as a road trip movie, and it's got a heart to it. And I actually confused it with some elements of Pee-wee's Big Adventure because when I watched Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I was like, oh, yeah, he's looking for like the dinosaurs or whatever. But I think the dinosaur aspect comes into this one. I'm talking about those dinosaur statues in the desert. I think it's the 15 freeway or whatever. But yeah, so you'll see some elements that are kind of familiar that are not Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but are in this movie, The Wizard. So there you go. Have you heard of The Wizard before until I told you about it, Jerome?
I had heard of The Wizard. I've never seen it, so this will be a new experience, and I'm looking forward to it because Lord knows I'm not looking forward to watching Mario another time.
Yeah, so that's the big main event, the Mario 93 movie that we've been shitting on the last couple weeks, but we're gonna eventually get to it. But first, we're gonna get to the Wizard and kind of go through that and see kind of where Fred Savage has gone from being this child actor to
To
successful
now
TV.
being canceled because he can't stop sexually harassing people.
He did. He got canceled. I didn't know that. Okay, well there
Oh
you go.
yeah, I mean he is. There are accusations on multiple shows. And
Well, I was
whatnot,
just gonna
so.
say he went on to be a successful TV director, but I guess that's out the window now. So
Well, he was a successful TV director, and then again, he couldn't stop harassing people. So that's where we're at. So we'll talk about before all of those accusations.
yeah, though I didn't even know that. I didn't
Baby
even know until just now. So there you go. But again, once I make the notes, I will know by next week. So there you go. So thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. But please just go on YouTube or Tubi and check these shows out. Even though we kind of shit on them a little bit, it's just a really cool nostalgia trip because I think you watch these shows and then watch the Mario movie coming up, you'll see the striking difference and be like, man, I wish they would have done these, or at least bring these shows back years ago or whatever. So check it out, and thank you for listening.
Do you think Vince McMahon tried to fire Lou Albano from this show just like he fired him so many times in the WWF?